Welcome. Welcome, you who approach this time as a journey toward the horizon, the beginning of the next chapter, seeking all of the insights and opportunities the new day offers. Welcome, you who live out your values with passion, who have a drive for transforming the world toward gratitude and healing, who are ignited by purpose. Welcome, you who ride the waves of life with serenity, you who show courage in facing the depths of true emotion, you who create and change and flow with time. Welcome, you who are here to seek the center, you who wish to be grounded in community, you who call our attention to the present moment. Welcome all from every direction with all of your gifts and your limits, with all that the past week and past year have given you. We find ourselves here on the threshold of a new day, some would say a new year, at a time when the past and the present are stirred together in the cauldron of what we shall become. Today we remember our beloved dead. Today we give thanks to the people and the forces that helped us to reach this moment. Today we gather with the saints and sinners and souls who have been, are being, and will be in this congregation and beyond, as we open up a new path to the future. And now let us join together and light the candles of community. And now let us stand in body or in spirit as we light the chalice. In sightless night, terrors draw near, nameless fears of talon and tooth, hopelessness yawns before us, an abyss, alone and unknown in the gloom, longing for the dawn. O sacred flame, blaze forth, wisdom brought to life. Guide us with the light of hope, the warmth of love, the beacon of purpose and meaning. Because we are all afraid of the dark, let there be light. Let us join together in the spoken affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth and freedom, and to help one another. Our opening thought comes from Marcus Cicero. The life of the dead is placed on the memories of the living. The love you gave in life keeps people alive beyond their time. Anyone who was given love will always live on in another's heart. Our opening song is Here We Have Gathered. Our first reading comes from Marjorie Shuhaki, and she is writing about Hartshorne's views, Charles Hartshorne, the Unitarian Universalist philosopher and theologian, his views on subjective immortality. She writes, also present in Hartshorne's discussions is the gentle chiding that he gives to those who, for whatever reason, cannot accept the inevitability of death. The very fragility and brevity of life contribute to its beauty. Our small lives are bounded at either end with infinite time. We are like carbon become diamonds by the very intensity of pressure, brought about as the weight of such infinity bears down upon our mortality. Hartshorne conveys the wonder of life that comes about precisely through its shining brevity. Our practices this morning will be reading the poem The True Descendant by William L. Wallace. Who is the true descendant? The one who owns the tribal lands, has manners or facial features of the ancestors, bears the family name, holds the ancient heirlooms. A person may have all of these, yet still not be in dynamic relationship with the past. For to imitate the past is to betray it, but to live by spirit at its best is to fulfill it. When we grasp what is central to the past, we lay hold of the future. For future and past are but two faces of life, and every experience of life is encounter with the present. Our second reading comes from Matt Haig from his work, How to Stop Time. People you love never die. That is what Omai had said all those years ago, and he was right. They don't die, not completely. They live in your mind the way they always lived inside you. You keep their light alive. If you remember them well enough, they can still guide you, like the shine of long extinguished stars could guide ships in unfamiliar waters. Well, it's really nice to be with you this morning as I was running from one gate in the Phoenix airport to another gate in the Phoenix airport yesterday evening, not knowing if we would make that flight. I was afraid I might have to make that call down here to have you hit the emergency service button underneath the podium here. But fortunately, even though all the flights were late last night, which is, by the way, why I made that flight, is because the other flight ended up being late. I was able to get back to Oklahoma City last night from a very interesting conference that I attended on religion and science that was looking at ways to deal with religious cultural competence and the teaching of evolutionary theory in universities and colleges, especially universities and colleges that have religious affiliations. So that was a very interesting time. And it was in a retreat center in a beautiful canyon just outside of Provo, Utah. So it was, really a rough few days. The fall colors were amazing as well. So it is wonderful to be here and to have that opportunity as well. The title of my discourse this morning is a little bit different than perhaps some titles you've seen in my previous discourses. The Walking Dead, Ways in Which the Dead Are Among the Living. Here on this Halloween day, and in many traditions, tomorrow the celebration of All Souls as well. As I've gotten older and I've come to grips with my own mortality, as we do, especially when we get older, and also I've come to grips with the mortality of friends and family, I've become more and more aware of the influence of those who are dead on our lives today. I've become really aware how immensely fortunate that I am that the memories that I have of my family members and other loved ones who have died are not only pleasant memories, but also often inspirational to me. My relationship with them continues through the memory that I have of their lives, and it also continues through the influence that they have in my life today, even though they are not physically present with me. In the midst of the mourning that I have because of the lack of that physical presence, I'm comforted. I'm comforted by a continued relationship that they have with me in memory and influence, which I experience as I just simply call it their spiritual presence in my life. I often find myself reflecting on my grandparents, who, although they have died a number of years ago, and one even died 10 months before I was born, even though they've died a number of years ago, they still have an ongoing impact on my life and an ongoing impact on the lives of my parents who are still living and an ongoing impact on the lives of our children as well. I'll just take one example, the example of my maternal grandfather, Grandpa Humans, as I would call him. He was a physiologist who taught in medical school. He had a PhD and an MD, and he taught at the University of Wisconsin for over 30 years, and before that at the University of Oregon Medical School. His parents were devout Methodists who lived in rural northern Kentucky, where my grandfather Humans was born and raised, and he had 4 siblings, so there were 5 in total. There was another sibling who died at a very young age, but the 5 of them lived on. And so he and his 4 siblings grew up there in northern Kentucky. And his devout Methodist parents had chosen him as the one of the 5 who would become a Methodist minister. And so out of an attempt to follow in their wishes and their will, my Grandpa Humans went to Vanderbilt University to get a bachelor's of divinity, which is what you got at that time, back in the 1920s, in order to prepare to become a Methodist minister. He made it there at Vanderbilt for 1 year and came home and told his parents that he was going to major in science. that was his calling for his vocational future, for his career, was to major in science, which he did. He went to another school in Kentucky and then went to the University of Wisconsin and did a PhD in physiology, and later did a medical degree at the University of Oregon, and had a distinguished career in medicine and medical research. My grandpa Humans and my dad, and my dad is not my grandpa Humans' son, that's his son-in-law, both my grandpa Humans and my dad wanted me to become a medical doctor. And they let me know this a lot. They told me this a lot. They encouraged me. They wanted me to take as many science classes as I possibly could. My grandpa even gave me his old, very nice microscope as a gift, as part of this encouragement to go more into the sciences, specifically biology, and then eventually medicine. I did not do that. I went to college and majored in religion and philosophy, and then went to seminary, like my grandpa Humans had done, except I actually felt called to be there, and finished seminary with my Master of Divinity at Candler School of Theology, and then went on, of course, to do a PhD in social ethics. But when I was ordained as a United Methodist minister in Oklahoma City many years later, my grandpa and grandma Humans, who were still living, came to the ordination, and my grandpa came up to me after the ordination service and said, "My mom and dad can rest peacefully now." There's one of their descendants who's now a Methodist minister. And forward a little bit, one of our daughters, Ray, is now majoring in cell and molecular biology with a minor in chemistry at the university where I work, Oklahoma City University. Our other daughter, Sophia, is very different. She's majoring in dance performance and has a real love of the arts and performance. But when it became clear to us that Ray was going to major in cell and molecular biology, and it's becoming more and more clear to us that she wants to be a medical doctor, maybe dermatology, maybe some other field, I gave her that microscope. And that ongoing influence of my grandpa Humans in the family was very, very apparent to me. And so I can say to the spiritual presence of my grandpa and to my living father that you can rest peacefully now, that you are going to have likely another physician as one of your descendants in the family. And then, of course, I just got back from a religion and science conference. So that influence of my father and grandfather, who are very into science, is still having an impact on me today. Now, I'm also aware that the presence of the dead, what I'm calling the spiritual presence of the dead in our lives, is not always experienced as a positive thing. It's not always a positive thing. Sometimes the memories we have of the dead and the influence that they have in our lives, sometimes that's more traumatic rather than inspirational. Sometimes the relationship with the dead is not clearly good or bad, but some ambiguous combination of the two. It's sometimes the case that what the dead have done in their lives continues to haunt us in the present, bringing more trauma in the present than joy. There are some who are dead that we want to forget, or at the very least, we want to experience some healing from the trauma that their actions have caused us. Hopefully, this recognition of the ambiguity of the legacy of those who have come before us that has brought us both inspiration and trauma, both healing and heartache, pride and shame, and both lasting values and lasting harm, will remind us how important it is for us to live in such a way that the memories and legacies of our lives will increase rather than diminish the quality of life for those who live beyond our last breath and those who actually come after us. May we all attempt to live in such a way that our legacy will be one of love, a legacy of healing, and not one that haunts the future with continued trauma and continued harm. Now, I believe actually that the next couple of weeks, we're going to experience an event in the world that actually provides us with a collective opportunity as a global community to make progress on leaving a healing legacy for the future. Right now, today, there's a conference that's beginning in Glasgow, United Kingdom, the 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference that is also sometimes called COP, Conference of the Parties, COP for short. This is COP 26, so there's been 26 of these conferences of the parties. And so it's beginning today on Halloween Day, which begs the question, will the outcomes from this Conference of Parties, COP 26, haunt the future, or will they be a blessing to the future? I believe that each generation ought to be judged on the extent to which we have enhanced or diminished the lives of future generations. And when it comes to the climate crisis, the judgment day of climate chaos is looming over us. I've been encouraged to see, though, that the rhetoric and the aspirations expressed in our global agreements to address climate change and the crisis that we're experiencing are beginning to come closer to realizing the fierce urgency of now. But our past and current actions, what we're actually doing, those are frighteningly inadequate. While our international trade agreements are legally binding, so when we make trade agreements in the world, those are legally binding, our international climate agreements continue to be voluntary. What we have agreed to do is not nearly enough, and both nationally and globally, we have not come close to doing what we actually agreed to do. At our current pace of climate change, with the mitigation efforts that we've already put into place, we are forecasted to experience a 2.7 degrees Celsius increase over pre-industrial global average temperatures by the end of the 21st century. Here's the good news. This is much better than the increases we would see with no climate action at all. But it is also, and this is the bad news, it is also well over the 2 degrees Celsius threshold that most climate scientists see as a point of no return, in which feedback processes will amplify the warming and move us towards an unlivable climate forever. And that will alter human civilization, certainly, as we currently know it. With a livable climate, literally a livable climate in the balance, what will it take for our global actions to be commensurate with our global rhetoric and our global aspirations? As we prepare for COP 26, the current stalemate on climate action here in the United States illustrates the challenges that we face to cultivate the political will that we need to address the climate crisis. Over and over again, we prioritize short-term economic concerns and profits over ecological responsibility and sustainability. The problem is that there are still trillions of dollars to be made by the fossil fuel industry if we simply maintain the status quo, if we simply continue to rely on oil, natural gas, and coal for our energy. And it is simply not in their financial interest to change. Currently, Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, who personally makes millions of those trillions of dollars, is the most notable face of this problem as he continues to do the bidding of the fossil fuel industry and benefit his own significant investments in the coal industry by using his leverage in a 50-50 Senate to cut the most meaningful action on climate from the reconciliation bill that is currently before Congress. Cutting meaningful programs, cutting programs that might bring meaningful movement and progress in relation to the climate crisis we are facing, will perpetuate the trauma of the climate crisis from now, both now and in the future. And not only for us as human beings, but for all life on Earth. Failing to act for climate justice will harm us in the present and will haunt the future with almost unimaginable suffering. Forgive me, there'll be a few Halloween references in the next paragraph. In a very real sense, our flagrant action, in this case, our flagrant inaction to address the climate crisis is making future generations something akin to the Walking Dead in the midst of the nightmare of climate chaos. And although the silence of the lands about the climate crisis makes me want to scream and perhaps even feel like the world is going psycho, I will simply say calmly that the call for us to do something about climate change is coming from inside the house, our world house, that is. And if we don't take that call seriously, this will become a scary movie that none of us will want to see. I think it's safe to say that the climate crisis is all trick and no treat. All Halloween joking aside, right now there are 5 young persons from the Sunrise Movement who are on a hunger strike right now at the White House. And they're demanding Congress to pass and the president to sign climate legislation that will address the urgency of what we're facing. These 5 young persons understand what needs to happen for us not to haunt the future. They know that we are in the last days to preserve a livable climate for humanity. And they're doing all they can to make sure that their generation will be a generation that will bring more quality of life to future generations rather than trauma. I'm hoping that today we might all have the courage and the compassion and the commitment to join them in some way, that we might find within ourselves the humanity for self-transformation for the sake of others, that we might learn from the wisdom of the past, that we might be inspired by those who have come before us, who still walk among us, at least in a spiritual sense, and that we might be inspired to become involved in love and justice, and also in action in relation to the climate crisis that we're facing, and not be intent on becoming the ghosts of climate chaos that will haunt humanity and all of life for generations to come. At this time, we'll have our time of giving, and those who wish may bring their gifts to the table, and of course there are other opportunities to give online as well. Our parting thought this morning comes from Ralph Ellison, who wrote, "Some people are your relatives, but others are your ancestors, and you choose the ones you want to have as ancestors. You create yourself out of those values." Let's stand and body our spirit for the extinguishing of the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.